Good morning, class 11s. So I hope you all had a good time in your puja vacations. And so, since we've completed the chapter and I'd asked you all to do your work, and a few of you all have submitted, so I expect the others to submit as well. So, with this, we'll start this chapter, which is second last chapter, which is Introducing Western Sociologists. So here basically we'll study about these classical sociologists who Karl Marx, Max Weber, and Durkheim. These people are very important. Okay, they laid the foundation of sociology. So in this video, we will not be studying about them, but about the various instances or revolutions which led to the emergence of the discipline of sociology. So sociology emerged as a result of the revolution and is often called the child of revolution. So basically there were like three revolutions, that is the enlightenment or the age or the quest of reason, the French Revolution and the Industrial Revolution, because of which there was a need to study the society, and as a result the discipline of, or the subject of sociology came about. Okay, so sociology as a result is called child of revolution because it was these revolutions that initiated the need to study the various changes that were being brought about in the society and the need for a new discipline to study these changes specifically. So the Enlightenment or the Age of Reason, sorry for the spelling, the political sovereignty embedded in the French Revolution and the mass manufacture which began in the Industrial Revolution led to the emergence of sociology as a discipline. So the Age of Reason, that is the Enlightenment, and the political sovereignty embedded in the French Revolution. So French Revolution which brought about political freedom in the society, and the mass manufacture which began in the Industrial Revolution. So Industrial Revolution laid the foundation of new industries, large scale production. So such revolutions brought about changes in the society, and in order to study these changes a new discipline was required, and that came about as sociology. So the first revolution is the Enlightenment. During the late 17th and the 18th century, there was an emergence of a new way of thinking, that was rational thinking. So earlier, before the age of reason, before the age of enlightenment, there was more of dominance of religious thinking. Okay, so religion and the divine and the natural, they were kept as, or they were considered to be the central, and they were considered to be the most superior. But slowly people began to believe or think about things critically, and think about and try to search for reasons, okay, about particular things. So because of such instances the age of reason began. People began to think everything rationally, practically, and not on the basis of religion. So human was kept at the center of universe, and rational or reasonable thought as the basic characteristics of human beings. So in the age of reason, the central part of religion, the religion, natural, divinity, all of such things were removed from their the central position, and more primacy and more importance was given to human being, because they could think critically and they could give reasons about things. And as a result, this characteristics of human beings, to be able to think things critically, okay, became more important than that of religious thinking. The humans became both the producer and the user of reasonable and rational knowledge. Yeah. So the human beings, it was human beings who produced reasonable and practical knowledge, and it was the humans themselves who used such knowledge. The divine, the natural, and religion was displaced, and the primacy was given to rational thinking. Like I mentioned, that there was more of reason, scientific understanding of things began rather than religious understanding of things. As a result, the Enlightenment period changed and developed the attitude of the people. So people were earlier orthodox and traditional, but slowly they became modern, developed, okay, and they began to think practically and scientifically with the coming of the age of revolution. So the second revolution that played an important role in the formation or the emergence of sociology was the French Revolution. Okay, so here basically France before revolution was under the rule of the monarch. Okay, and then the entire power was vested in the Catholic Church. So because of that, people did not have their own political social freedom. So it was French Revolution that brought about changes. Okay, so it led to the emergence of political sovereignty. So people began to have political freedom. Okay, they began to have their own voice. They could raise voices. The citizens were emancipated from the oppressive rule of the religious and feudal institutions. So earlier, how I told you that France was under the rule of monarchy, and there was no like individuality or freedom for the people. So with the coming of revolution, they were like they were broken. The people broke, like how do I put it? They broke themselves from the chains of oppression. Okay, and from the chains of feudal and Catholic Church. The peasants were freed from their bonds, and the taxes they had to pay were cancelled. So earlier there was this thing called bonded labor. Okay, where like a particular labor who took too much of credit, or yeah, they took too much of loan. Okay, and then they could not pay. So as a result, the person they took loan from, they began to work for them. Okay, so that happened hereditary. The peasant's son or peasant's family, they used to also work for them. So such things like it was abolished, and even they did not have to pay any rent, sorry, taxes, yeah, something like rent only. So the citizens were given rights, and all were equal before the law. So earlier the individuality and political freedom, which was not there for the people, began to emerge with the coming of the French Revolution. A separation was built between the public realm and the private realm. So there was a separation. The state uh, or the lords could not interfere in the life of the people. The ideals of French Revolution, you have studied this, right? Liberty, equality, fraternity. This is very basic. It became the core of the state. So these were the ideals that the state followed in order to run like in order to run their state. Okay, so basically in sociology, when we study such revolutions, we will not be studying as in how we study history or political science, and we will not be studying it in a historical or in a political manner, but in a very social manner. Okay, how it affected the life of the commoners, the changes that was brought about in the life of the citizens. We will study it in a very social and in a very day to day manner, not in a complex way. Okay, so because sociology is the study of society and what actually happens in your day to day life. So the third revolution is the Industrial Revolution, which led to the formation of industries, which brought about a lot of changes in various aspects of the society. So industrial revolution began in the 18th and the 19th century, where foundations of modern industries were laid down. So earlier there were small cottage industries, okay, household industries where people used to work in the house itself. But with the coming of industrial revolution, there was large industries were built, and people, instead of working in their homes like earlier, they used to come to the factories and industries to work. New technologies using scientific knowledge began, and new ways of organizing labor and market began. So earlier, when everything was done manually, but slowly with industrial revolution, new technologies came about which made things easier, but then also changed the way people worked. How earlier their industries, or their cottage industries were home based, but with the coming of industrial revolution and the setting up of industries, people had to come to work. Okay, so the way things were working earlier was, it started changing. So large scale production, import and export of goods and raw materials, okay, men, women and children working as laborers in poor working conditions and low wages began. So basically, with the coming of industrial revolution, people began to work as laborers in factories. It was not only the men or the women, but also the children who had to work under very harsh and hazardous conditions. Okay, like when you use all these scientific technology, obviously there are some consequences. Pollution takes place, and that directly affects the workers, and then they used to work for like long hours. Okay, a lot of period of time, for a longer period of time, and they used to get very low wages. Cities and towns expanded, and the rich kept getting richer, whereas the poor kept getting poorer. So cities and towns, it began to the population in the cities and the towns, it began to increase, as people from the rural areas, they used to come to these cities and places where industries were in order to work. So like when a lot of poor people or a lot of laborers began to come from rural areas, they began to live in slums, okay, as like the living conditions in the urban areas are quite higher. So they began to live in slums in very poor conditions, whereas the rich people, they began to live a very lavish and luxurious life. So the rich kept getting richer and the poor kept getting poorer, and then the gap between the rich and the poor widened because of the growing industrialization and the way in which the market and the labor was being organized, okay. So such instances that began to take place in the society, the social consequences of all of these revolutions on the life of the citizens at that point of time it needed to be studied. So it was sociology which emerged as a discipline in order to study all of these effects. So for today, that is it, and in the next video we will be talking about the classical sociologists. Thank you.